All right, for those of you joining us, welcome. We're going to get started just in a moment. Welcome for those of you who are joining. Go ahead and get settled in. We're going to take a minute before we start. Looking forward to today's event. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening for those of you joining us from all over the globe. As we round out today's Women's History Month this year, we welcome you to our Real Talk from the Top series. Go ahead and get settled. We're going to get started in just a moment. As you're joining us, we'd love for you to engage with us in the chat function below. Let us know where you're joining in, what your role is. We'd love to learn a little bit about you as folks are getting settled in. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get us kicked off here. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. If you're just about now hopping on, we'd love for you to introduce yourself on our chat function. Let us know where you're joining in from. Let us know a little bit about yourself and your role. We'd love to hear from you. My name is Danya Madhusudan, and I support our diversity, equity, and inclusion community, and as well as our CEO Scale Up Pledge here on Insight's Portfolio Experience team. Our mission is to build a vibrant community amongst the companies that Insight invests in. And a few of the ways that we do this is by hosting events like this one, producing content, and through our Go Portfolio platform. I know many of you are already part of our platform, but for those of you in our portfolio who haven't yet joined, you'll receive information on how you can join to connect, learn, and grow from your peers across the portfolio. So just a few housekeeping items before we kick off today's programming. We'd love to continue to engage with you through the chat function throughout this conversation. So feel free to write in comments and engage with one another. After this webinar, you'll receive a 1 to 2 minute feedback survey. We'd love to hear how we can continue to improve our programming. And lastly, we'll be recording this event. So this event will be posted on our Go platform as well as our blog, so you can revisit it and share it with your colleagues. And with that, I'll go ahead and start us off. We started our Real Talk from the Top series in March of 2021, and we're excited to welcome our third set of panelists this year. We have Whit, Bouck, our managing director on our Insight Partners team today, who will be moderating this conversation with 3 CEOs that Insight has invested in. We have Bronwyn Spira, CEO of Force Therapeutics, Paige Robinson, CEO of Will Reed, and Habib, CEO of Ryder on the panel. And so without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Whit to start us off.
Great. Thanks, Danya, and welcome everybody. We're really excited to have you all here. And I am very much looking forward to hearing the commentary from our panelists today, all of whom have some great perspectives on Talk from the Top. And hopefully we'll get some really good candid insights about how each of us have navigated our careers and give you some really good advice along the way. So I'm going to take just a few minutes here to introduce myself, and then I'm going to hand it around to the other 3 panelists to introduce themselves and give you a little bit of background on each of our career journey and how we got where we are today. So Danya mentioned I'm a managing director here at Insight. And I've joined just over a year ago after a 30-odd year career in software. Started out really as an engineer in the early days at Oracle, and then kind of through an odd journey, not at all a straight line, ended up in product management, product marketing, and that's really, I think, where I discovered my love of turning on ideas for people about how they can solve problems with the kinds of products that we were offering. And so ever since then, really, I've been in a go-to-market set of roles, and everything from a GM of managing P&Ls, which I've done a couple times. I've been a CMO, I think 3 times, and my most recent operating role was as a COO. All of those companies I joined were pretty small in the early days. Even Oracle, we were like one building on a hill in Belmont. There were no towers on the highway that you see on 101 these days. I was at Sybase, which you probably don't even know anymore. It's long gone, but before it was public. I joined a company called Documentum that was a pioneer in content management when we were maybe 50 people, and went through IPO and then later acquisition. And then I joined Bouck, which probably most of you do know, when we were about 100 people and pre-IPO, and I built the enterprise business there, took over as CMO, and then we IPO'd, and I ultimately left to join HelloSign, which was a tiny little startup that I helped grow and scale. And then we eventually sold the company to Dropbox, and now I'm here. So it's been a very interesting journey with lots of different perspectives and learnings. And I think what I love about what I'm doing today is that I have an opportunity to work with founders and leaders and share a lot of what I learned along the way and be a resource to help navigate some of the challenges that companies go through as they scale. So I feel very fortunate to be in the place that I'm in today on 6 different boards and working with founders like May. I'm on May's board, and really get to learn a lot from how people are starting companies today and bring some of my experience to bear. So lots more to share along the way, but let me turn it over with that to, let's start with you, Paige.
Thank you, Whit. Hello, everyone. I'm so glad you're here. I'm Paige Robinson, and I am the CEO and founder of Will Reed. Will Reed is an executive search firm built exclusively for early stage founders. So my world is really seed through Series B. We focus on building out early go-to-market teams, and actually I've gotten to work with a number of Insight portcos, 2 female founders actually. So shout out to Blue Ocean and WiseTac. Those are really, really fun searches. And I would say our search process is really tailor-made for early stage. So we spent a lot of time just thinking about what that means for how we run search, and even the candidate network that we build that really is stage specific to help these founders really build the right team for that stage. A little bit about my background. I quit my corporate job at the ripe age of 24 and have pursued entrepreneurial life ever since then in a number of different ventures. My longest venture has been at Will Reed, really focused on talent, but also had briefly a tech startup, and randomly also a frozen yogurt company at a point in my life. But a lot of my learnings as an executive have really been through observation, mentorship, and candidly learning from mistakes. And so I've had to really kind of build my own board and collect my mentors as I go, a lot candidly, even from my customers. I learn a ton from my fellow founders that I work with. And I tell them that often, but I just am a consummate collector. And while this path has been really challenging in some ways, I think it has given me the confidence as a leader that I can continue to evolve and develop through the different stages of my business. My passion is talent. And honestly, I think it's innate. I am deeply wired to care about people and relationships, and I'm fascinated by the why behind why people are the way they are. So what that means is that if you get stuck next to me on an airplane flight, I will know your entire story by the time that we land. I live in Dallas, Texas. I did see a few Texans in the chat. That's fun. I'm a mom to 3 kids, age 6 and under, and I'm happily married most of the time to an equally ambitious tech executive, which means our lives are fun, complicated, and extremely busy, probably like many of us on the call. I'm personally just honored to be a part of this conversation, both from a personal standpoint as a female executive, but also because of the role that Will Reed and firms like ourselves get to play in building the leadership teams of startups across our ecosystem. I firmly believe that kind of big corporate culture is often a delayed representation of what is already happening right now in startups. So think about the pervasiveness of Slack, more flexible PTO policies, or some of the feedback tools that we just assume are a given, or even just some of the changes that we're seeing in healthcare for employees. All of that is being laboratoried right now in companies that are represented on this call. And so I think our role as women in this ecosystem has just a tremendous potential to shape an even brighter future for women that are coming up behind us, as well as ourselves. And I would just argue that I know tech feels very turbulent and pretty challenging right now, but I think oftentimes it's in those environments that act as almost a forcing mechanism to go back and recheck our math on assumptions on how we work and live. And I think there's going to be a lot of really cool things that come out of this. I will close with an authentic story about what is it like to be a working mom and a working executive. I could give you lots of stats about what that experience may be like, but here's just a very tangible one from last week. So life is, as I mentioned, very busy. It's juggling a lot of different things. my 4-year-old daughter, we just enrolled her into 4-year-old soccer, and I am doing the mom CEO thing where I'm on a Zoom call with a client, slacking with employees, getting fires of text from everybody for all different kinds of stuff. And my husband and I are trying to do that, tactical, who's doing what thing on the side. I'm like, okay, take Reese here, it's at this time, she plays for the pink team. And that's like pretty much all I know. Well, turns out all the teams are pink in 4-year-old soccer. And so my husband and I put together at the end of the day that Reese not only played for the wrong soccer team, but it was also picture day. So she's on the front row in the wrong picture, played for the wrong team, and got the wrong hair bow. And I share that story only to say that I know and I feel on an everyday basis that there is so much beauty in combining our lives and work. And I think that this conversation, I hope, gives us an authentic space to talk about the wonderful, amazing opportunities that we have, and also the challenges of just sometimes feeling like you're failing in both of trying to do both of these things. So thank you again for having me. I'm very excited for this conversation.
Great. Thank you so much, Paige. And Bronwyn, let's go to you.
Terrific. Thank you so much. So I'm Bronwyn Spira. I'm the CEO and founder of Force Therapeutics. Force is a digital care management and coordination platform that enables physicians to better manage and treat their patients remotely. And so, basically by providing their patients with the education they need, exercise, a trusted communication channel. Our care teams have been able to improve patient outcomes and satisfaction, and also reduce the overall cost of care. And so we are a Series B company. We took a round from Inside in 2018. Before this journey, this is my first real tech kind of business. But I spent 20 years as a physical therapist, so really dealing inside of the industry that we now enable, which I think has given me a lot of unique perspectives and a deep understanding of the problem we're trying to solve. And in terms of kind of my executive experience, I spent 8 years managing and running the Rusk Institute at NYU Medical Center's rehab division, which, it was an executive role, but within such a large enterprise organization, there were layers and layers and teams to support, and it wasn't really kind of single-handedly running the show, but it was really good groundwork for a lot of the things you have to deal with as a CEO. But when I left Rusk, I started a series or a number of outpatient brick and mortar orthopedic clinics in and around the tri-state area. I'm from New York. And so, although this is, as I said, my first foray into the tech industry, that was kind of really getting my feet wet on, managing a P&L and understanding really the nuts and bolts of what it means to run and build a business from scratch. So, so 12 years ago, we started Force, and it's really born out of a lot of the challenges that my own patients were experiencing, and also my own needs, where, patients really can be very much in the dark about what they need to do, what they need to know, how they need to recover from it, whatever injury or surgery they've just been through. And with that, not knowing comes a large amount of anxiety. And so a lot of what we built at Force was to provide them with that information that helped them not only feel better and feel more confident about their own recovery, but also actually speed them to better outcomes. And, for my own purposes, I wanted that visibility, and I wanted that connection with my patients when they weren't inside the clinic or inside of my own purview. So that's really kind of the origin of Force, and 12 years later, we've treated almost 600,000 patients, and we're in 76 hospitals around the country. So, there's obviously was a need for this, and it's just super exciting to be experiencing this kind of tech revolution in healthcare. And so that's really the company. And then personally, I am a mother of two. I live actually just outside of New York in Connecticut, but our offices are in New York City. And great team, great fun work environment, and just really loving the journey.
Tremendous. Thanks, Bronwyn. And May, how about you?
Oh, thank goodness. I was hoping it would be calm when it became my turn. So hopefully you all can't hear the 2-year-old and the 4-year-old on the other side of this wall. I am May Habib. I am the co-founder and CEO of an AI company called Writer. We are in San Francisco, but I split my time between San Francisco and London, where my British and San Francisco hating husband lives and is from. Yes, we all make sacrifices. The business is a Series A company. We've got the great privilege of having Whit on our board and Insight to have led our Series A. Love the Insight team. I feel like I'm talking to folks from Insight multiple times a week. So they have been really great as we have started scaling. I think this time next year, we will be double, if not triple, where we are now, which is super, super scary and also very exciting because I have been in NLP for 8 years now, and it's really fun to be scaling something that we're really passionate about and is impacting so many people. I started my career on Wall Street at Lehman Brothers. So it was like major deja vu a few weeks ago with the Silicon Valley Bank thing happening on a Friday and the bailout on a Sunday, taking me back to 2008. And then I was in Dubai for the Dubai debt crash of 2009. So yeah, I've sort of done all the crashes. It came to the Valley after, I guess there was a SaaS mini crash, 2015, 2016. Yeah, that's where I started my career. Then I joined a sovereign wealth fund that was the largest fee-paying client of Lehman and Barclays at the time. And I distinctly remember telling people, and I interviewed for the big private equity jobs and had offers and, had done all of that prep to go from analyst to private equity. I remember telling friends that I wanted the feeling and experience of jumping off a cliff career-wise. I've had this feeling that I needed to do something completely opposite what everyone else was doing. That's where my energy was going. And so it wasn't tech entrepreneurship, which is, what I thought I would want to do at that point. But I really had sort of drunk the Kool-Aid and wanted to do this private equity thing. And I was in the tech banking group at Lehman and then Barclays. And so joined the Sovereign Wealth Fund to help build tech companies and invest in them, and ended up spending almost 4 years working in semiconductors. So it's so funny. I would never have thought, and maybe it's fate, but that so much of my life now would be dependent on Moore's law and what has happened to compute and the cost of compute over the last few years. But it was a really fun few years building a company called Global Foundries, really from the ground up, no pun intended. And we took manufacturing assets out of AMD, spun them out, and set up a standalone company that had never had to be a company before. It was a captive foundry for a chip maker. And now it is standard that you do like the foundry part separate from the chip part, like NVIDIA. And then there are these like massive manufacturing outfits. Our biggest competitor was TSMC. So this in Taiwan, so this dynamic of like always having this like massive competitor way bigger than you, and you got to outsmart them. That's like a very natural place career-wise that I have been. I just realized that. And I did that until I felt like I needed to jump off a cliff again. And I started first a localization company, a software localization company. And I met my co-founder through NLP communities in Dubai. And then we moved to San Francisco in 2016 to work on that. And that company was called Cordoba. We pivoted to writer in 2020. That was not an easy decision because that business was doing very well. But it wasn't going to be, I thought, the $1 billion ARR business, software business. So we can dig into our various kind of career forks, but that was definitely, the third big one for me. And excited for this conversation. I also think there are very few opportunities to have the real conversation, just how absolutely hard it all is, being an entrepreneur and trying to do things that are against the grain, whatever that means for you. There is friction by definition, and how you deal with that it can be and a beautiful bounty in your life, as it has been in mine, or it can be very depressing. And sometimes it's both of those things. So excited for this conversation.
Yeah, thanks, May. And that's a great, I think, lead into getting into some of the real conversation. We're calling this event Real Talk from the Top. It is meant to be a candid sharing of experiences and advice and what have you. So, share your stories along the way here. But I think, the first question I want to ask all three of you, and I have some specific questions for each of you along the way. And I should mention to the audience that, first of all, thank you, because so many of you submitted questions as part of your registration. And we took all of those questions in. I think we had a total of 70. Many of them were kind of around common themes. And so the questions that we're asking today of the panelists are very much from you and reflect kind of the areas that you wanted to hear about. I don't think we'll get time today to do live Q&A. Feel free to put questions into the chat if you wish. We'll get to them if we can, but just know that we're trying to address the questions that you asked. So the first one is, we constantly see data and statistics published about the percentage of women in the executive ranks within companies and still being very much in the minority on a global basis. And so the first question I want to ask each of you is, what do you see as the obstacles for women getting into the executive ranks? And how have you navigated some of those challenges in your career? We'll start there. So anyone want to kick us off here? Paige, you're unmuted. Go.
I think one of the biggest challenges, I think there are several, but I think one of the biggest challenges is that oftentimes at the juncture when women are ready to have a family, the income level of where they are in their career does not support necessarily the infrastructure required to do both well. And so you feel like you have to kind of like honestly, the math at that decision point may not make sense. And so you have to honestly bet on your future self that you'll be glad that you basically made the investment in the infrastructure required to do it, to get to that next level where the math does make sense. And so it's kind of at that, oftentimes in your early 30s, where you're like, okay, I'm building a career, I believe in this, but when I really look at the math of where I am today and paying for, childcare and a nanny and all these kinds of things, the math at that moment probably won't make sense. But the math 5 years from where you are will. And so I think that decision point, if you don't have a lot of support and mentors and vision and are excited about what you're doing, the more straightforward answer is to tap out at that point or to take a part-time role. So there are a number of other contributing factors, but I see that as a pretty significant one that's hard to navigate.
we're going to talk more about that whole balance of work and family and how that factors in. But yeah, for sure, we see a lot of women that do decide to either take a part-time job or at least step back in their career progression while they're having very young children. Certainly. And what about you, Bronwyn, May? What other factors do you guys see as sort of being obstacles in women moving into the executive ranks and or founding a company for that matter?
I can go next. I think there are fewer and fewer women. And that is like uncomfortable for me. There are a lot of women at Writer. I feel very comfortable working with a lot of women. It's funny that my first 2 jobs had very few women in them. Maybe that's why now I just want to be surrounded with women. I remember going to the first SaaStr conference in 2016 in San Francisco when I first got here. It was in Nob Hill in SF, and like walking in and like seeing literally like a room full of hundreds of men. And it was like, okay, like this is so triggering. Like it's so uncomfortable. I like don't want to feel like I need to like force my way into all of these conversations. I already don't like networking. And it was like a real like heart palpitation moment. And I hadn't had that in a while. You're like putting yourself out there. I had started a company, and it was like so many men. And I remember thinking like, why am I so scared of like groups of men in like circles laughing, but I was like something so like oppressive about that. So I think that is definitely one barrier, is like so much of getting to the top is about doing hard things.
Yeah.
And so you are doing hard things in uncomfortable environments in a place where you stand out.
Bronwyn, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's really, I think there was a moment in time when there seemed to be a shift, and I feel like now it's gone back again a little bit, maybe because of COVID. I felt like women were really like going the distance and their voices were being heard. And I do worry a little bit that not only COVID, but also Roe v. Wade, I think that really, really flies in the face of all the accomplishments and progress that we were seeing with female leaders. And I just think that that's a shame, that that's yet another thing that women have to consider as they're about to take a big leap, because, as Paige mentioned and May mentioned, there are so many kind of big, scary obstacles out there that you have to overcome. But now there's another one as well. And it's just, it's really just an unfortunate thing. So in my own experience, I think in healthcare, you tend to see women in leadership roles a little bit more potentially than in fintech or other verticals. And in Force, we've always had a very strong representation of women at the leadership level, because women make healthcare choices. They are empathetic to the healthcare industry. And so in as much as I think globally there are a lot of obstacles out there for women, I think in my own personal experience, I've been very lucky to be surrounded by a lot of smart, career-focused, ambitious women that have really helped me become who I am, but also helped the company become what it is today. And so I think it's important for female leaders to give give everybody in the organization that opportunity to lead and to speak and to have their voices heard. And I think that it has to start somewhere. And so being, a CEO and running companies and hiring people and managing groups of people, I think, being able to bring women up is something that's always been extremely important to me, and it served me well and certainly served all the companies I've worked at very well.
Bronwyn, I was going to ask you this question a bit later, but this seems like an opportune time. Can you talk a little bit about some of the strategies you employ to bring women up in an organization as you're talking about?
Absolutely. I think, part of it is a little bit innate, right? And who I am and what I care about, and being a female leader. I think that attracts women into my organization, which I welcome. But I think it's really building equity and belonging into every aspect of the company that you're building. And that goes from your marketing materials, your branding, your hiring processes, your learning and development processes. If you're building a company and a culture that gives everybody that opportunity and the ability to feel like I matter, what I say matters, and I can grow with this company, I think it serves you well in the long run. And I think that's certainly something I've always cared deeply about. And it's certainly paid dividends.
Yeah, it sounds like you really have to make a conscious, visible effort to really make sure people know that you're supportive of women in the company and we want to recruit women into the company.
Yeah, but when they look at your website and they see, 5 women running every team, that says it all, right? I do think that in the world of business, you can say one thing, but doing it and showing that you're actually, putting your efforts behind it, and you have that to show for it is even more important than talking about it.
Yeah, for sure. May I kind of want to jump back to some of your commentary on that last question of walking into that SaaStr conference. How did you end up mustering the courage to be present and be a contributing member of that event? And I don't know, did you learn anything out of that event that have changed how you've done those kinds of things since then?
Yeah, good question. I think, I built relationships, and actually, you made me think about the fact that an investor I really, really like, and an investor who invested, I actually met that day. And so, it's just kind of chipping away at the edges until you're kind of in the center, and you will now walk into these events and, a ton of people, and they know you, and, you're like in that circle. So I think courage comes with the territory. I think we all have to have like deep reserves of it to survive what we're doing for years. But yeah, it's just, facing it and getting through it.
Well, I like the concept of, over time, the more you build relationships and hopefully also encourage other women to attend with you, then, you kind of get a little more comfortable with that scenario. Yeah. Well, let's shift into the next question here. So I think all 3 of you have relatively young kids. There's been a lot of commentary, some of the questions that came in from the registrants, as well as each of you in your opening remarks talking about juggling the craziness of being a CEO and founder with having a family, being an executive with having a family, building a career with having a family. There's a lot of balancing points in there to think through. And Paige, you touched on some of this, in your last commentary. But very curious to hear from each of you, if you could go back, like, what do you wish you knew then that you know now? And I think, Paige, again, you touched on something here about like building the infrastructure, even if the math doesn't make sense. But talk a little bit more, each of you, about what advice do you have for the women on the call today, or you hear the recording later, as to, what should you be thinking about, and how should you be thinking about building a career and building a family at the same time? Feel free, anyone jump in.
I'm happy to take a first stab at it. As we mentioned, we already talked about the infrastructure piece. I do think, I didn't really understand when I was starting my company that this played out over, 7 or 8 years, that, I would look up and be, even more passionate about being a great mom, in addition to being a really good CEO. And what does it take to actually facilitate doing that, especially in like a 2-parent working household. And so, I think candidly, knowing what I know now, I think I would have wished I had talked to a few people that were a couple steps ahead of me, just to kind of start to get the roadmap, because I think candidly, there was some maneuvering and like some missed turns along the way of figuring out childcare and what was going to work best for us and that kind of thing. And so I think just encouraging folks that are, really excited and passionate about doing this over the long haul to get some inputs to that, as much as you would even, get inputs into other aspects of your career, so that you kind of have, a goal in mind. And also like gives you good understanding too, of like, when you go ask for the raise, are you like, think about your next step in your career, you like really have a clear understanding of the math of like, what does your career trajectory have to look like for this to continue to like make sense and be exciting and all those things. I think the other thing that I think have seen in hindsight, kind of two things is one, who you partner with really matters. So this lifestyle is not for everyone. And so it's really important, I think, to make sure, as you're building your career, that you both are on the same page about what you're trying to build and the amount of work and just commitment to juggling both will look like. And so in hindsight, again, we didn't really have those conversations. I'm very grateful that it's worked out, but I think if I was to do it all over again, I think we probably should have. And then I think the final one is just a really like, working moms are like the hardest people to coordinate with, to like grab a cup of coffee with, or to do like I have very little time to do a lot of the things I would love to do. However, I think it is really, really important to find a handful of things that make you feel human, because you are working all the time. You go from, working nonstop on your startup, you walk out the door and your kids are not aware that you just put in a full day's worth of work, and they expect you're back on the clock and you're working again. And then you get done with work and you haven't talked to your husband all day. And now you're, it's not work, but it's work in a way, like reconnecting and doing all these things. So there's like around the clock, work. And so I think you have to find a handful of things that make you feel human and make you feel like who you are, or you will just get burned out. And I think a lot of the work over the last couple of years for me has been figuring out what those handful of things are that really refuel me and sustain through this season. So I'm really curious to hear though, Brown and May, what y'all have learned too, as you look back on it.
Yeah, I so relate to everything you just said, Paige. And I have 2 kids and I had no idea what I was getting into. No idea. And I often think, would I have made a different decision? Because in the beginning, when things are just really so hard and all you can really see is the sacrifice, and it's sacrificing time with your kids and not being at the soccer games and not being able to go to the school play and what have you. But I think there's always this other side of that coin, which is, you have to think longer term and know that when your kids grow up and you've built something that is meaningful, that will feed them, all that they lost in the beginning, they'll get back on the end. And, I had 2 working parents growing up, and I always had respect for work. And what it means to dedicate yourself to something and to be passionate and committed to an end goal. And so even when I'm like feeling sorry for myself and, woe is me, I'm also thinking about, the bigger picture here is so important. And, I like to pretend that I'm changing the world. And of course I'm not, but in my way, I'm trying to. And, I do think like one day my kids are going to look back and say, my mom may not have been around as much as I would have liked, but look at this thing she did. So I think that's really kind of trying to be balanced about the sacrifice and the reward. But I agree with you. And I think, to everybody on this call, you have to figure out what you're going to carve, what makes sense for you in terms of carving out time that takes you out of work, because there are no holidays, there are no weekends. You actually have to make the effort and actually structure your time to make sure you have something for you, because otherwise you'll get lost in the whole thing.
May, how about you?
Yeah, I think, on the one hand, I don't like to always talk about the kids part of the struggle, because it is a struggle, whether we have kids or not. I do think it's a different flavor of struggle. And, it is like, I like to reframe. I forget who and I don't know if you all know the Chief community. I think they're amazing. Someone in one of the talks said something about reframing for gratitude, not like, oh, I have to go to my kid's Easter thing. Oh, I get to go to my kid's Easter thing. And so, we get to not press pause on our careers while having these like wonderful little people in our lives. And I love being a mom. That is my favorite part of my life. And I really, really love my company. So that's saying a lot. But I do like non-standard things. I like fucking hate bath time. I think that's actually really low quality time. And like the world has told us that is like super good time. Like I refuse. And you just have to I kind of count the minutes. It's kind of crazy. Like I want to have 15 minutes per kid per day. And I have a 16-hour day. I know what I'm doing in 15-minute chunks. And I know when I'm seeing what kid when. We have very little 2-parent, 2-kid time. And that's also something we've decided, a couple holidays a year, it'll be the 4 of us. But otherwise we are going to figure out kind of parallel paths of couple time, dad and kids time, mom and kids time, one-on-one with each kid time. But 2-on-2 is also very low quality time because you're not really getting, the kids are agitated, and you're not really getting relationship time. So throw out any playbooks if you're trying to do this and just really focus on what works for your own family and your own schedule. And I do think it's absolutely worth it and just so fulfilling to be able to do both.
And I'm going to kind of give just a different point of view. Stephanie, one of our guests, asked a question about what about the women who choose not to have kids? And I'm one of those. So, just to share kind of a different perspective, because I think, May, you hit on it, that the career that we build for ourselves it's a struggle no matter what, and it's shaped differently. And I'll share kind of my decision process about choosing not to have children. Neither my husband nor I were very excited about the idea of having kids. We weren't burning to be parents. And I actually think with all the effort and struggles that you guys are talking about, you really have to want to be a parent to have children. And we just didn't really have that. So, but we went through a long discussion, and over the course of, God, I don't know, probably more than a year of kind of thinking it through, talking to people who'd had kids and were career oriented, people who didn't have children and were career oriented. And I think at the end of the day, we both love to work. My husband is a serial entrepreneur. He's on his 4th startup. I've, as I described, joined small companies and helped them through scale, which I think is a really busy time for a company. And so we talked a lot about it. It was we're going to have to make compromises and sacrifices if we decide to have children. And one or both of us is going to need to slow down a little bit, or we're going to need a tremendous support infrastructure, or both. And we weren't excited about any of that. And so we basically made a very conscious decision to not have children so that we could both devote everything we wanted to our careers. And I think these are all very valid choices, very individualized choices that we each have to dig deep and make. And I think, some of the advice that you 3 are giving about some of the things to really think about and to expect if you decide to do a family and be a CEO and leader or executive is really, really meaningful. And I think I admire you 3 so much, along with others that do what you do to take it all on. And I look back and I still feel good about my decision. For me and for my husband, it was the right call for us. So really interesting. Well, let's, yeah, go ahead.
One thing that Paige touched on in her remarks on things that she wishes she knew. I wish people were more forthcoming about what we mean when we say infrastructure. We mean what I mean is there is literally no minute where I am the only or even the directly responsible individual for my kids. There's not one waking minute, Monday to Sunday, because there's no other way to get in the recharge time. If my only minutes that I'm free, that I'm not working or doing relationship time or doing kids time, I'm also sort of doing ambulatory kids time. So there is like live-in nanny and a backup nanny and a weekend nanny and a housekeeper and a cook. And literally my whole paycheck is that infrastructure. And like, that is the level of investment. If you like, don't want to be doing dry shampoo twice a month and need to work out and, like all of the things that you need. And I tried it the like 9-to-5 nanny way, and we were just miserable. And so we've now swung to the whole other direction. And my husband has a big job and he travels a ton also. And, you just have to really, I think, absorb the fact that it is going to take 5 people to replace a full-time mom, and 3 of them you will pay. We also live close to my sister and my brother-in-law and my mother-in-law, and they're all over. So
Yeah.
like that, it really is a village that you have to convene. And it does mean you have to really love your job, which is great because like the hard stuff is what is worth it anyway.
I'm really glad you like double clicked on that, May, because again, that was like, I had no idea. And honestly, I think with the conversation you in your head, like I have no regrets. This is 100% like what I was made to do, but we never had like you gave yourself the gift of that conversation, which I think most women don't know. They don't know. Like I didn't know. I had no idea what life would look like at this stage, or like what would be required to support it, I think. And so I love that both of these perspectives get shared, because I think for women on the call, like both are valid, both are a wonderful blessing, and both are an incredible gift to other women. And I think that this is again the honest dialogue I think is so helpful to hear on both sides of it.
Totally. And I did one thing I didn't mention is that when I met my husband, I was actually 38. So it was kind of like we make a decision. We didn't have the gift of time. I wasn't 25 or 28 or 32. Interesting. I had been married before, and I definitely felt the hormonal pull to have children that we all feel when we're kind of at the ripeness of our fertility, and call it like early mid-30s. And I had to mentally think about like, I was not with the right partner. I was absolutely not with the right partner. And it was a very conscious thought in my head of like, it's not going to go well. Like, I don't want to have children with this person, and I'm not sure I want children anyway. So nope, not doing that. And, thank goodness I made that call. But I think that gave me a gift, Paige, to what you're talking about, to have that really honest, deep dialogue and really think through what we wanted. I was a little bit older and had been through that other experience, which helped too. So I think the takeaway maybe for the audience here across all of us is give yourself the gift of exploring what you want. And you 3 have imparted some amazing advice and insights about if you're going to have an executive career and build a family, some of the things that you need to come to expect and need to build around you to enable that to happen. So thank you guys for those stories. Those are amazing insights. Okay, I'm going to switch topics, like completely different subject matter here, because I can't believe it, but we only have like 10 minutes left. Like, where'd the time go? But I'd love to talk a little bit about the role that like women and men can play in bringing women up through the career ranks. And, how have you either seen, discovered, or fostered men to also support women in this journey? And any advice that you have there about how we can better leverage men to further women in the workplace? May, you want to start?
Yeah. So much of what makes everyone at a company successful comes down to the culture. And my co-founder is a man, and we really deeply believe that more diverse teams will be more successful. Like, it's literally in the research. We did a deep dive on research out of Google that showed that the more like that on the surface, the team seemed like really not that homogenous, the more successful the products that they launched were. And it's because like no one is taking things for granted. People are questioning each other, and we very much have that kind of culture, and women are a big part of it. So without even trying, and I'll tell you why I put that in air quotes, we are 50% women on the executive team, 75% of women on the board, and about 45% women across the whole company. Engineering is our lowest percentage at 25%, but like the leadership is women, like our 2 PMs are, our head of QA, our lead ML. So it is, and it's diverse on all sorts of other dimensions that we care about as well. And so certainly like that being something that is important, that like, you know, from a candidate panels perspective and how we direct our hiring managers and all of those kinds of things, like I need my co-founder's support on that. And so diversity is, you know, men are brought into it, just kind of by definition of needing to build a good culture. I would say the other thing that we've been very intentional about is, you know, our topic earlier is actually like discrimination against non-parents in favor of parents, because like it is very easy to set up boundaries as a parent on your calendar because you're like, I'm picking so-and-so from school here, and then I've done this. And like, we are a very calendar based company. And, you know, folks who don't have those responsibilities, but have other things going on in their life that may not be on their calendar. You know, we did feel like we're working longer hours, or, you know, we're being asked to stretch. And so, you know, there are all sorts of ways that you need both men and women kind of in partnership. And sometimes it may feel like you're pulling towards the men, and sometimes it may feel like you're pulling towards the woman, you know, but I think starting from a shared understanding and vision of what you want the business to be makes it so much easier to have the harder conversations and the trade-offs that we need to make if we do want parents at the company, if we do want more women at the company. So yeah, that would be, I don't know if I have good answers there, but my thoughts on that.
Yeah, I did see one example actually when I was at Bouck that was pretty great. We had a leader who was very overtly supportive of diversity and women in the workplace. And we actually asked him to be a co-sponsor of our kind of women network group. And that was really impactful. And a lot of people really felt like that was a great thing that we had a man and a woman kind of co-anchoring that. So that's a strategy I've seen work too. I want to touch on other topics since we're running out of time. So I'm going to switch gears again. Paige, it's actually a nice adjunct, but can you talk a little bit about strategies you use to empower and retain top women talent, especially given, you know, you see this not only at your own company, but as you recruit for other companies?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that candidly, like this shift from in office to remote to now, I think, you know, what we at least see with a lot of our founders is kind of the prevailing shift back to hybrid. I think from a recruitment standpoint, I think some of the ways that you can really attract women is to have a lot of clarity around what the expectations are on the front end around kind of the working style of the company, so that people can opt in for what makes sense for them, or like honestly opt out. If it doesn't fit, they're going to be an opt out later. And so I think the more clarity you can give in the recruitment process there, I think is super helpful. And then I think also, you know, from a transparency standpoint around compensation, you know, one of the things that we really talk to a lot of our founders about is like really coming into the offer process with a clear framework of how you arrived at compensation and more clarity around, you know, how this meets different benchmarks and what the different trade-offs are. I think, you know, particularly for female executives and everyone, I think that level of transparency is really, really important to how you attract top talent. In terms of like retention and development, I think a lot of this is around, you know, candidly, like I mean, this isn't going to be, you know, super, super new, but I just think that like figuring out what development and learning is actually what the people on your team actually want. And so I think a lot of times, you know, companies and founders will invest a lot of money or put money aside for certain things. But if that's not actually what your executive leadership team needs or wants, or where their gaps are, then, you know, you've kind of like allocated spend to something that's not really there. And so I think, especially in the early days, like taking a more flexible approach to how you think about like coming alongside and supporting your executives. Like it may be actually like, hey, I'm going to pay for an executive coach for you, or hey, I'm going to ensure that we have, you get to attend this conference that is specific to your, your segment, or paying for an advisor. I just think like giving yourself some flexibility there is a way to really tailor make that executive feel like you're coming alongside of them for their development.
Awesome. And actually, Bronwyn, this touches on a topic I know you're passionate about, which is about how you build some of this into your culture and invest in culture very deliberately. And I'd love to hear a little bit about kind of how some of what May and Paige have talked about, factor into how you think about making sure that this is integrated into culture.
Yeah. And, it's so interesting. People use the word culture and it's something that they think it's words on a wall that everybody has to read every day when, but in my mind, it's not an extra thing. It's the innate thing. Right. And so I think that in building a work culture, it comes from everything you do. And so, when you have a certain, ethos within your company, you have to build that into the way you hire, the way you interview, your learning and development processes, your career laddering, and how you think about that. And it has to be, to Paige's point, who I think knows a lot more about this than I probably do, just, having done it, but not really studied it as much. But, it's not an extra thing. It's everything, right? It's in everything you do, and you have to incorporate it and talk about it. And so every town hall, you have to, link it back to the pillars of your culture and what your company values are. But the way, you do your company check-ins, and if you really want to create genuine belonging and not just check the box, DE&I, equity, it really has to come from the fabric of the organization, and everybody coming into that organization has to understand not only what is important, but why it's important. And I think when you think about it that way, you actually end up weeding out people that aren't a fit, and that's good for them and good for you, right? Because you really want to be able to have those checkpoints that, they're buying into the mission, they believe what we believe, and that will serve them well and serve the company well. So
really good advice there. It's like walk the talk, right? Make it part of the fabric. I love that idea. All right. So we're like almost out of time. So this is the last question, lightning round a bit. Bronwyn, let's stay with you. How do you find coaches and mentors? What's the advice we can give to the attendees today of how you find a coach, a mentor, a sponsor, somebody to really help you move your career forward?
I think the key thing about mentorship is somebody who you feel comfortable and safe with, and in whatever form that takes, right? As you move through your career, it's people that have worked alongside you, people that you've hired and have just really been a great, co-partner to you, people that you've looked up to and respected in your career. I think, where people get tripped up a little bit is thinking it has to be this very, very formal relationship. I've never really approached it that way. It's like, we form a relationship, a bond, and that bond includes, I'm going to call you up one day when I have a question about this thing that I know you know about. And to me, that's important, because every mentor can offer you different things from their own experience or their own point of view. And I think getting more of a rounded, inputs are just going to help you much more, help you grow in many different directions.
May, how do you go about finding coaches and mentors?
Yeah, I mean, my Lehman mentor is taking me to meet the CIO of HSBC next week. So, from every part of my life, I still have those deep relationships. So, and they've all been men actually. But, more recently, I think it was Paige who said it. I would say like board members and customers and leaders on my team have been like mentors also. So, being thirsty for learning and being I don't know, focused on the relationships will like pay dividends for years, both in those relationships, continuing to bring you joy and learning, and then you being able to attract other folks who teach you something, and that maybe you teach something to too. So I don't know. It's something that comes naturally to me as an extroverted person, and that I haven't had to be like tactical about. But it's also why I'm from a like a buddy system at work, and with our own like kind of budding leaders. I'm very deliberate about asking them, like, who are your advisors? Who do you turn to? Like, who are you trying to learn from? And using company money and equity to give them those people. So I want everybody on the team to have that. And some folks on our team have 2 people, and I have seen that like really benefit them. So yeah, that would be my advice as an exec, like who has benefited from deep mentorship and sponsorship, to kind of pay it forward to others.
Beautiful. And I know we're at time, but Paige, I want to give you a chance to contribute here too. Any other advice on how to find coaches and mentors?
I would just let yourself off the hook of finding one person that's going to be a mentor for everything. Like I've collected people for everything, and there's not going to be a one person that solves it all. And that's an unfair burden to put on especially another like female executive. Learn from them what you can, give what you can, and continue to make great relationships across your life. So.
Yeah, I'll just kind of summarize what I think I heard here, because I think there's some great advice, and then Danya, I'll let you close us out here. But I think really important that it doesn't have to be a formal, oh my God, we're going to have a call every week or every month or whatever. It doesn't need to be a formal thing. Collect a bunch of mentors. I love this concept somebody posted about a personal board of directors. It's, collect people who have talents and views and things that are important to you, and you use them somewhat informally, like, hey, I'm having this problem and would really like to bounce something off of you because you know something about this I don't. And I think the third kind of element of that is ask. I find that this idea of a formal relationship is very intimidating, but I think if you ask someone, hey, can I get 20 minutes of your time to bounce something off of you? Because I think you have expertise here. It's rare that somebody will give you a hard no. So I think, that's a much easier thing to give. So first of all, thank you to Paige, Bronwyn, and May for being on this panel and sharing such amazing insights and personal stories. Cannot thank you enough. It's a wonderful way to close out Women's History Month, and just want to say thanks again. Honored to be with you guys.
Thanks all. Likewise. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you, Whit, for moderating. It has been such a great event to hear from all of you through the chat. You will be receiving this recording, as well as we'll be posting it on our blog, as well as our Go platform, as we mentioned. And we'll also be showing you a little bit of a one-to-many programming that we host here at Insight called Level Up to Scale Up, where we sponsor women across our portfolio in a live cohort training. And so you'll hear a bit about how you can get involved in this training, both in May as well as October, in our follow-up email. So with that, I know we're over time. Thank you so much for joining us. And we really appreciate your time today.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Talk
Bye.
soon.